Let me start whenever.
Yep.
Alright. So today I'm going to talk about the death penalty. As you guys know, the death penalty is the legal authorization of killing someone as punishment for a crime. So my main claim is that the death penalty is a very unethical practice of the capital punishment because it has no beneficial value to it. Since looking at the numbers, you could see how the death penalty would cost more to the state than if we were to put someone in life in prison. It also violates our human rights. And lastly, I also have an example for you guys of a man named Stanley Williams that I'll get to later. So first off, the cost. So the cost to put someone to death will be around $1.26 million. Compared to putting someone to death in life in prison, they will take, the state will lose $740,000. That is a huge gap of money that the government's putting into just for putting this man to death. If you guys are asking why we spend more to putting someone to death rather than keep them in prison, it's because all the hours necessary for all the judges, lawyers, and personnel needed to review and see the trials to put this man to death, they pile up and end up costing more money to the state. As for the human rights, we all have basic human rights, and the government really has should not have any opportunity to ignore our human rights and to determine the fate of our rest of our lives. Even if the system can be flawed, as in if you look at some of the reviews in the past 100 years, past trials, there's been over 150 exonerated people from death row who were proven innocent. So if we're allowed to put someone to death row, how is it that why would it not be a perfect system? Since we already have so many people who were proven innocent, so how many people did we execute that were innocent? Lastly, the example person I have was a man named Stanley Williams. Stanley Williams was a man who co-founded the Crips gang in Los Angeles. He was very notorious and was caught with the murder of 4 people and was sentenced to the death penalty. During his time in prison, he was in jail for over 26 years. That's a long time for someone to be waiting for their inevitable death. While he was in prison, controversy started when he was waiting for his death, as he started writing children's books for about gang violence and guns and drugs abuse. Many people near his execution date, many people wanted him to be exonerated, or at least like a retrial, because they saw that he was like a reformed man, right? Those 26 years in prison really changed a man, and many people believe that he shouldn't be put to death because it really has changed him. It was like a whole lifetime passed since his conviction. So, in conclusion, the death penalty is very unethical because there is no beneficial value. It costs too much to the state, and it ignores our human rights. And the example of Stanley Williams proves that our death penalty should be at least revised and looked at again.
All right, well, the first issue is that this is a value claim rather than a claim of fact. The question of whether it's ethical or unethical clearly falls into the purview of value arguments. The claim that there is no beneficial value to the death penalty is presented as your first supporting idea, and you don't really provide any evidence or information there about whether or not there is a benefit. You do have an argument about cost. and you suggest that it costs twice as much to execute a prisoner as it does to sentence them, I guess, to life imprisonment, but there was no source on this information. I don't doubt that that's probably true, but you definitely need to cite the sources of this information. The fact that it's a result of the appellate process seems to suggest that the reason it costs so much is because we are taking care to avoid executing somebody whose rights have been violated or who may in fact not be guilty of the crime that has been that they've been convicted of. And I'm not exactly sure that anybody thinks that that's a bad use of the funds to try and make sure that we've got it right. So the question about cost comes down to whether or not we can afford it, or whether or not, again, there's a benefit that we get from the cost that we expend, and there wasn't any discussion of whether or not there is a benefit. That was kind of the assertion at the beginning of the speech. And then there is an assertion about 150 people who were exonerated, who were proven innocent, and this is an assertion at this point. I assume that you got the number someplace, but you don't tell us where it came from and what the criteria that was used to determine that. So it's awfully hard to evaluate that as evidence. And then Tookie Williams, as an example, is primarily another value claim, suggesting that reform in some way overcomes the crimes that he committed. And 26 years of waiting to die and being able to do something productive in that 26 years is more important than the shortened lives of the 4 people that he murdered. That's kind of a value claim that you're making here, that this reform here certainly deserves the extension of his life, even if it's not freedom. Wanting a retrial what would be required would be some information that suggested he wasn't guilty of the crime, and as far as I recall, nobody doubted that he was guilty of the crime. So the real argument really remains a value issue here, and that's problematic for this assignment. All right.